Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Around the Big Ten podcast. I'm Marc Givler, joined by Chip Minnich as always. Chip, the big weekend kind of lived up to the billing in my mind. The college football weekend, it was a loaded schedule. We saw a lot of great games, several of which occurred in the Big Ten. I think a lot of the Big Ten games lived up to their billing. Most notably, of course, the Oregon and Penn State game, which went to double overtime before the Ducks were able to intercept Drew Aller and with the game sealing interception after blowing a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter. So there's a lot to unpack from that one. The narratives are all out there now. Can Drew Aller quarterback you to a championship? Can James Franklin win big games? How legitimate is Oregon? Is Dante Moore maybe the best quarterback in the country? Dan Lanning thinks so. Lots to talk about there, Chip. First of all, just your initial reaction to the result of that game. We both picked Oregon. I felt great about it up until about 3 minutes to go in the game in regulation. Even when it was like 3-0 early, I'm like, nah, Oregon just looked better for like 50 to 52 minutes of that game. And then they just kind of gave it back to Penn State. And then once it went into overtime, you're like, oh, okay, which way could this go? Because Penn State had all the momentum. What was your initial takeaways from watching all that?
I completely agree with you. I thought Oregon looked like the better team throughout most of the game until the very last portion. I mean, credit to Penn State. I mean, they clawed their way back. You mentioned Drew Aller. I mean, he certainly had his moments in the fourth quarter that allowed Penn State to get that game into overtime. But I completely agree with the hype around Dante Moore. It is legitimate. I mean, we did pick Oregon to win, but I thought Dante Moore played extremely well. I was so impressed with Oregon's true freshmen that were called upon throughout the game, even with how loud it was, the stakes, all those kind of things. So I definitely believe that Oregon is going to be in the Big Ten championship. I'd be surprised if they stumble at all in the regular season. I know that we've got some big games coming up in the Big Ten that feature Oregon, but they just look so good. And as far as Penn State, I immediately, as soon as Drew Aller threw that interception, we talked about this last week, the fact that he's from the Cleveland area. And again, just to kind of reinforce the fact that I never saw him play in high school, but the hype around him, the expectations, the fact that he threw that interception. So now, even though a few moments ago I mentioned how he played so well down the stretch that was so crucial in getting Penn State into overtime, that interception is what's going to be the lasting image of that game, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's going to be another James Franklin press conference where we see kind of the same answers from Franklin that we normally do in these types of games. And I don't know what is the answer for Penn State? Is it simply – because I said this about Ryan Day. I mean, Ryan Day was getting hammered there for a while too by the media, not to the level – like his struggles in big games were nothing compared to what Franklin's struggles against top 10 teams are. I mean, a little bit just much different there and over a prolonged period of time there for Franklin. But I kind of just said with Ryan Day, I was like, he's just got to keep putting himself in these situations and he'll break through. Eventually, if you just keep getting to these, situations, you break through. But Penn State's not breaking through in these, and it's just, what is the answer here? You can't fire Franklin. Like, the buyout's too big. The record is probably too good. So that's kind of off the table if you're Penn State at this point, unless this team nosedives here over the next 2 years. But what can they do about this? I don't know how you shake this at this point, because it's just they can't quite close these games.
Well, and here's just a thought. I mean, because we talked about this in the offseason, and my admiration of Drew Aller in terms of the arm strength. I mean, it's there. Like that one beautiful touchdown pass. I mean, you see it. To me, I think the issue for Penn State is they have been seeking an offensive identity similar to when they were at their height during the Joe Moorhead offensive coordinator. It was when they had, now granted, generational talent at running back with Saquon Barkley, but they also had that dual threat quarterback in Trace McSorley, who was so instrumental in being able to keep defenses off balance. And my point being is I just have never felt that the marriage of Drew Aller and Andy Kotelnicki, it's more of a marriage of convenience. Let's get through this. I just believe, and no disrespect to Bo Perbula, he did what he thought was in his best long-term interest by transferring out. I just think that Penn State needs to get back to an offense that I genuinely believe, I think if you gave Kotelnicki truth serum, I think he would prefer to have more of a mobile quarterback. That's what was successful for him when he was at Kansas. I think that would be more successful for Penn State. So that would be the long term. Now, the short term this year, I mean, it's a tough thing because, as I said, it's more of a marriage of convenience. You've got Drew Aller, you've got Katron Allen, Nick Singleton. They all came back, with the hype, like, okay, we're all coming back to win a national championship. It's not completely beyond the realm of possibility. It's just that it took a pretty hard hit on Saturday night in Happy Valley.
Yeah, I continue to go back and look, and I'm like, I thought they had upgraded their receivers a little bit. I still something's off. Either their scheme, their personnel at wide receiver, or Aller's not seeing things that are there. Like, something is off with their passing game, and it doesn't scare anybody. And if you can, like, teams like Oregon, like Ohio State, who I think matches up really well with Penn State, when you have athletes in that front seven and you don't need to really load the box to stop the run, I don't see their passing game scaring anybody. And it's been this way for a long time now. And I just wonder, Penn State's usually had good receivers over, my lifetime. And I just wonder where those players are the last 5 years or so. The playmakers on the outside just aren't there. You couple that with Aller, who I just don't know. Like, is he pressing? He's got to be pressing, right? Like, yeah, in these moments, like, because he knows what people are saying. I don't know how they kick this with this group.
Right. And kind of, to my point about a moment ago is, for example, when Trace McSorley was there, the idea that, all right, and now granted, Penn State had Ohio State on the ropes a few times and couldn't close the deal, but at least it was like, okay, like that could have been anyone's ball game. I mean, any Ohio State fan would tell you that, all right, it was just a matter of Ohio State being able, to rise to the occasion, win some games. I mean, like the classic comeback in Columbus, being able to, the late Dwayne Haskins being able to pull a win out in Happy Valley. Those things happen. I just think I agree with you. I think something about Drew Aller, when the things start to get a little more tense and tight, he presses, and the fact that the passing game, I'm not sure if it's a combination of him not seeing, if it's more of the scheme, whatever it might be. I really do believe, I think the long term and it's would take a dramatic shift because, and correct me if I'm wrong, like Ethan Grunkemeyer is the primary backup, and he's built more along the lines of like a Drew Aller as well, right? Like he's not, like the dual threat kind. So that would be like, okay, hey, we're gonna completely change for next season in terms of like with recruiting and the transfer portal and all that. I think that would help, but yeah, I think for Penn State, they've really got to do some soul searching in terms of what they want that offense to be with Drew Aller at the helm.
Yeah, and to your point on Grunkemeyer, he's not. I would probably put him somewhere between McSorley and Aller. I mean, he's not immobile, but he is a pass first guy, but he's a little more sudden than Aller, but he's also not quite as big. Aller's got that big body they like to run that quarterback power with now, and I don't know. I think if I put too much of this on the receivers, it's going to look like I'm like, trying to cover for Aller or Franklin or whoever, and I'm not. They don't scare anybody on the outside. They still don't, and now they don't have Tyler Warren in the middle, though they still have good tight ends. I don't know. Yeah, it would be interesting. It'd be interesting to have an alternate universe where Drew Aller goes to the NFL or something, and Bo Prabula stays and gets to play with this team, and because he's doing some good things at Missouri right now, he's athletic. That would be an interesting universe to alternate universe to visit. But yeah, it just something's off. But we talk about those Ohio State pulled a few out against them that they maybe should or shouldn't have. Their receivers made plays in those games.
Yes, that's true.
Like their playmakers made plays. They didn't win those games like 7-6. They won those games, what was it, like 36, 35 right. One year or something. Like their outside receivers made plays.
Right.
And their quarterback, so like they got to find more playmakers. They got to find more guys who scare you defensively. Because even like Singleton and Allen, they're really good backs. They don't scare you the way Saquon Barkley scares you. Kaytron Allen, you are not a good defense is not worried about Kaytron Allen taking a pitch and going 75 yards for a touchdown. They're not. He'll wear you down 5-6 yards at a time, but no one is scared of that. Every time Saquon Barkley touched the ball, it could be a touchdown.
Right.
Like they're different just a different. I don't know where the playmakers are. I really don't, and they got to get that figured out one way or another.
I mean, when you look at the receiving, just to kind of put to your point, Singleton had 3 receptions, Kaytron Allen had 2. They're not going downfield. I mean, Devontae Ross wound up as the leading receiver, but even he only had 4 receptions. They're just not.
He gave him something. Ross gave him something. And they finally got that shot. Aller made a great throw on it, but it's like they don't seem to be able to get enough of those, or even not even like those 20 to 25 yard kind of like on the higher side of the intermediate range where there's some separation created and someone takes a slant and gets 20, 25. Like it just doesn't happen. And I don't think they scare defenses. So I continue to look at that match with Ohio State, and I think Ohio State matches up tremendously well with Penn State. And I think it's going to be a really tough game for Penn State to win, especially on the road. So then it comes down to they've got to beat Indiana, which, sure, I think, they're at home. You would think they would be favored in that game, but they've kind of got to split those 2 games to make the playoff at this point. I think they probably will. I think I'll give them maybe they'll beat Indiana and lose to Ohio State and get in at 10-2. I think that's probably fair, but their margin for error is slipping away here a little bit. Oregon, on the other hand, looks like one of the 2 best teams in college football to me.
Oh, easily. And like I said at the onset, De'Aaron Hill, Jordan Davison, DeCorian Moore. I mean, the fact that these guys on the recruiting side of things, the hype was there and they lived up to it. Now, granted, I don't want to, continually extol their talents, considering the fact that it was 1 game, but the fact that the larger point being that the coaching staff trusted these guys in a big game on the road, very tense situation, and they all came through. The fact that each of them in their own respective ways have certain roles to play. Now, DeCorian Moore, especially, I think he's emerging as a legitimate star. But with the running back tandem of De'Aaron Hill and Jordan Davison, different style of back, but both very effective. And let's not forget the fact that Dante Moore a year ago was in that backup role. I think that he really learned that he doesn't have to do it all himself. Now, No offense to Dante Moore. Maybe some of that was just kind of the reality of the situation he was in when he was a freshman at UCLA. But I think, I mean, he's certainly emerging as one of the top quarterbacks, if not definitely like in the top 5 that I've seen so far this season.
If I were an NFL GM and he came out this year, now he would have to essentially leave 2 years on the table. He could stay 2 more. Now he's not going to stay 2 more years, but he would have
one more, at least one more. Yeah.
Right. But if he decided to come out this year, he'd be the first quarterback off my board. Yeah. I don't think anyone in college football has the combination of arm talent, accuracy, athleticism, and improvisational skills that he has. I think there's guys who have bits and pieces of that, but in terms of having all of that in one package, I don't think anyone else has that. I think he's got a very good chance to be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft either this year or next year. I really do.
Yeah, I would just hope for his sake, and this is nothing against Dante Moore, that he will stay for at least another year, just simply because the realities of the NFL, the game, in terms of, you see it with really talented quarterbacks struggling at the onset, and then it's like, they get cut, they get traded, and they wind up on another team, and lo and behold, like, oh my gosh, like how much better? It's like, no, it's because, all right, the environment and the situation and the experience has finally allowed all of the talent that was there to kind of flourish. And my point being, with Dante Moore, I think, it's just one of these things where usually rookie quarterbacks are going to suffer because they go to a bad environment. There's not, all the pieces around them to allow them to thrive. And I would just think that Dante Moore, he's in a good situation, gaining valuable game rep experience. Another year is just going to make him even that much more attractive to NFL scouts.
Yeah, and I can tell you 17 people that don't want Dante Moore to come back, and that's the other head coaches in the Big Ten, because that offense would be silly next year if he comes back.
Exactly.
With all the young freshmen they have making plays already for them around him. So, all right, let's move on to other things in the Big Ten. Ohio State goes out to Washington. Really weird first half. I don't even want to say they started slow, because they didn't start slow. They drove right down the field on the opening drive, but then turned it over on downs inside the 5-yard line, and then were set up to have the ball at the 35 of Washington on their second drive and fumbled the punt return. But it took them a little bit to get, I guess, work out the kinks, however you want to put it. And then they really dominated that second half against Washington. And I've said this elsewhere, but Ohio State's had the number 1 points, either number 1 or number 2 points allowed defense the past 2 seasons, and they're number 1, I think, now. So like the last 2.5 seasons. So the last 3 defenses Ohio State's had to this point have been 1 or 2 in the country in points allowed per game. I think this one this year is almost, not maybe better. I think it's definitely better. And I think it's probably significantly better than their last 2 defenses because of what they can do with Caleb Downs and what their linebackers can do. This is the freakiest linebacker tandem they've had in a really long time. And Arvell Reese played the quarterback spy position on Saturday like that was what he was born to do. Damon Williams, who gashes everybody with his legs, I believe had negative 22 yards rushing. He couldn't get loose. He couldn't shake Reese in the open field. This defense is incredible, and college football fans deserve Dante Moore versus this defense at some point.
Very well put. Arvell Reese, we were just talking about the NFL draft scouts, how much they're going to fall in love with Dante Moore if they're not in love. They are openly lusting for Arvell Reese. Dane Brugler, who's one of the NFL draft analysts who I respect immensely. He has been over the top in terms of his praise of Arvell Reese, like you said. Damon Williams Jr. and my respect for Washington has not diminished. If anything, it's okay. They just ran into they ran into just a suffocating defense that they hadn't seen in their previous contests. I think Washington still has what it takes to get back into the college football playoff conversation. But yeah, give credit where credit is due. Matt Patricia is just scheming up everything so well for this Ohio State defense. And I really don't think that he's shown everything yet. I think it's just a matter of taking the talent that he has on hand, and he's just able to put them in positions to be successful. Arvell Reese especially. It certainly helps to have Caleb Downs kind of almost as like an extra. He's basically like an extra coach out on the field. Like he knows what everyone else needs to be doing. He is always, they alluded to this on the broadcast, just making tackles that are, I mean, they're not bone crushing tackles. They are just simply, okay, when he hits you, you're going to go down, and he's going to, if it's going to be for minimal gain, that is as well as you could possibly want. I will say that the one long run that Jonah Coleman had, my personal belief was that Caleb Downs was being held, wasn't called. That being said, the Ohio State defense pretty much kept Washington's very talented offense in check throughout most of that game.
Yeah, and I still think Washington's going to win 8 or 9 games this year.
Yep.
Even with some tough games left on their schedule. So I still think that, but I just think Ohio State's defense is playing at just an insane level right now. And I said it last week before these games. It feels like an Oregon-Ohio State collision course. Indiana's going to have something to say about that. Penn State still potentially could have something to say about that. I'm sure Michigan thinks they're going to have something to say about that. We're going to find out a little bit more about them the next few weeks. But it just feels like those two guys are – Lanning and Ryan Day are just going to be doing this every year until one of them quits. But, yeah, it just – that looks like a collision course to me. Illinois. That was a bounce back. Now, they almost blew it at the end, but that was a bounce back win. And do we have to revisit the USC toughness questions again?
I'm gonna put it on the back burner. It's simmering. I'm gonna put it on the back burner though, simply because USC. I do believe you raise very valid concerns. I'm gonna be able to feel more definitive after USC hosts Michigan, because that's what Michigan in a couple weeks, that's what Michigan is going to want to do. That's kind of what their offense is designed to, just pound you into submission, and we'll see if USC is up for the challenge. Getting back to Illinois, so impressive. Luke Altmaier, I didn't realize it until the day after that, for the first time since the days of Terrell Pryor, and it feels weird thinking about him in the fact that this was 15 years ago. Kind of, how scary time flies. But that a quarterback for the first time since 2010 ran for a touchdown, threw for a touchdown, and received a touchdown. Luke Altmaier is the heart and soul of that Illinois offense. And, it was just an impressive performance all around. Like you said, I think, Illinois certainly could have been, I don't want to say excused, but expected to kind of, we just got our faces kicked in the week previous and come out lethargic. They certainly should have won that game even more convincingly than they did. The turnovers that the self-inflicted mistakes, I think, greatly contributed, which, give credit to USC, they capitalized upon that. But I think Illinois deserves a ton of credit.
Right back in the college football playoff picture.
Exactly.
We set a benchmark for them to get to 6-2. So lose to Ohio State and somebody else, get to 6-2. And those last 4 games, they're going to be really big favorites. And they have a chance to go 10-2 and get in the playoff. So must win. That was a must win for Illinois, and they got it done. So congratulations to them. Indiana, on the other end of that blowout a couple weeks ago, Indiana we talked about it. We both picked them, but we were like, oh, this is weird. Like on paper, yes, Indiana, significantly better, but just Kinnick Stadium's a weird place, and Indiana barely survived.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many times this has happened where like Iowa, I mean, they just kind of somehow psychologically, emotionally, whatever it is, something about Kinnick Stadium that Iowa, they just bring you down to play the style of game that they want to play. And, I kept thinking now, I mean, it was just one of the realities of the fact that the game was on Peacock. I was kind of keeping an eye on, like the score versus, like flipping back and forth between like CBS and Peacock kind of a thing with the Ohio State Washington game. But as soon as the Ohio State Washington game was over, turning it over to see Iowa having an opportunity to kick a field goal that would have put them ahead. Now, granted, missed it. Indiana, they were able to, all right, we're gonna try and win this game. Phil Parker, up until that point, I thought in terms of just the scheme that he was playing against Indiana, obviously causing some frustration among the Hoosiers. Why he went with an all-out blitz that just kind of allowed Surratt to, score that winning touchdown with no problem. And I realized that Indiana tacked on an intentional safety. So the final score, the fact that Iowa only lost, by 5. I just think Indiana, I mean, that game against Oregon in a couple of weeks, that's going to be something to see.
Yeah, I'm not too down on it. Like, I'm not down at all on Indiana after this game. To compete like for a playoff spot or a championship, you're going to have a couple of these every year. No one wins every game by 50. You're going to have a couple of these moments where, and I thought they handled themselves well down the stretch, and I thought that was a gutsy win. It was weird though. I was mostly watching Ohio State Washington, and at one point I peeked over during a commercial, and like the game was tied
right
fairly late. Like it was well into the third quarter at that point. And I'm like, I'm just kind of like curious how the game had got to this point. Like, I was like, well, have they like shut down Mendoza? And Mendoza was like 9 for 13 with like a touchdown, like 13 attempts. So like they totally like made Indiana play their game. But I'm like, why does he have like 13 pass attempts at this point in the game? And he's like efficient and everything. Like, so I don't, that's just Iowa playing Jedi mind tricks, I guess. But it was interesting. But I thought, again, Indiana settled down. They made a play when they needed to, and they'll learn from this one. This will be one that helps them later on when they, like when they go to Penn State or when they play Oregon. Like they've got some tough games coming up here that this I think will help them with. So that was, again, that was another big one there. Indiana kind of needed that with some of the tough games they have coming up. You can't drop that one. So here's my question. Can the Big Ten get 5 into the college football playoff? I think they can, which I know sounds crazy, but I want to hear your take on that first before I explain myself.
Okay. Certainly anything is possible. I would say right now it's not probable. Right now. Like I would say that, Ohio State, Oregon, I don't want to say that they're locks, but for lack of a better word, they are. The two of them, like you said, that collision course. I think Indiana, depending on how everything shapes up. And I would say Penn State really depends on how they fit. I mean, if they drop the game to Indiana as well as Ohio State, I think you could say that they're out. And let's not forget, we were just talking about Iowa. They have to go to Iowa, by the way, the week before they play at Ohio State. So, I mean, stranger things have happened to Penn State. But I could see 4. I am not sold on Michigan yet. I think that offense, I think it's respectable, the fact that they are very true to running the ball, and but I have my skepticism about the fact that I think when they eventually play a team that is able to shut down the run, that's pretty much all they've got. And USC, I think they're teetering right now, like how they respond. Talked about them earlier, that they're going to be hosting Michigan. They have to come out and win that game. So those would be my ideas as to who your fifth team would be, but I'm kind of curious as to what you think.
So first of all, let's frame it from like the national perspective. The Big 12 is a mess. Like, that could be a one-bid league. It's possible. I think the Big 12 is going to eat itself alive. I think the ACC is a mess, especially after that Florida State loss to Virginia. I don't see the ACC doing any better than 2. And this is where I'm a little skeptical, but I think the SEC has 8 or 9 good teams and no great teams this year. And I think they're all going to eat each other. And I think we're going to have a lot of 9-3 SEC teams. So it's going to be interesting. There is certainly a path, and it's not a ridiculous one, where Ohio State and Oregon are like undefeated, or at least 11-1. Penn State's 10-2 with losses to undefeated Ohio State and undefeated Oregon. They're in. Indiana's 10-2 with losses to undefeated Oregon and Penn State and a road loss to Penn State. And then that 5th spot would be either Michigan, who has a very, very good schedule in conference this year, or a 10-2 Illinois team if they don't stub their toe.
Okay.
On really, like, they lose to Ohio State, and then, like, I think Washington might be their other game that they've got to be careful about. Like, I see 6 Big Ten teams. I don't think USC is a playoff team. I see 6 Big Ten teams that have a chance. And I'm not saying 6 will get in, but I really think the dominoes could fall in such a way where there's going to be 5 Big Ten teams with a tremendous argument to be in the playoff. And it's going to be a matter of to me, it's going to be a PR hurdle more than an actual on-field hurdle. It's going to be the PR hurdle of, well, that might mean the SEC only gets 3. Well, the SEC, as we've seen this year so far, doesn't look like it has a juggernaut. Is its best team the Alabama team that got just physically dominated by Florida State? Is that the SEC's best team? Is it LSU, who looks worse every week? That Clemson win doesn't mean anything anymore? Is it Georgia, who just doesn't look like Georgia right now? Tennessee doesn't play defense. Like, these teams, if they go 9-3, now if they go 11-1 or 10-2, put them in. But if these teams go 9-3, why are we putting them in over a 10-2 Penn State, a 10-2 Michigan, whatever it might be? Why would we do that? So I think the Big Ten has a real path to having a very strong argument to get 5 teams in.
I have to admit, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't think of Illinois. Just I was while you were giving your well thought out rationale, looking at Illinois' schedule, and again, it's like it's so crucial for Illinois after what they experienced at the hands of Indiana for them not to, play, think, so far down the road. But I think it's almost impossible if you're a college football fan like you and I not to, when you look at that schedule. So Illinois, and I know we'll talk about the Big Ten later this week, but they go on the road to Purdue, and as you said, they have the Ohio State game where they'll be the underdog on October 11th. They have a bye week, and then that kind of sets up. Okay, like that's where it's like, okay, like basically like pushing all your chips into the center of the table. If they can go on the road and beat Washington, like you said, it allows themselves. So even with that horrible beating at the hands of Indiana, and maybe they play Ohio State tough, because I mean, let's just face it, it's not going to be easy for Ohio State to just go in there and dominate. If they play Ohio State tough, even with 2 losses, I could see Illinois being that 5th team.
I mean, if they beat Washington, let's say they beat Purdue and lose to Ohio State. If they can then if they can regroup and win at Washington, which will be difficult. But if they do that, their last 4 are home Rutgers, home Maryland, at Wisconsin, home Northwestern. Like, they're going to crush Wisconsin and Northwestern.
Yes.
I think they'll beat Maryland at home. And I really haven't seen anything out of Rutgers that would lead me to believe they won't beat Rutgers at home. So, like, they have but even like a Michigan team, like, you look at Michigan, and what if they come in? First of all, we should, given recent history, we should not at all put one in the loss column against Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State kind of has to prove they can beat Michigan. But here's what Michigan has. Home Wisconsin, that's a win. At USC, a little dicey. I think that's a win. Home Washington's a little dicey. At Michigan State, home Purdue, that's a win. At Northwestern, that's a win. At Maryland, that's a win. And then home Ohio State. Like, there's a very real path to Michigan going 10-2. And then you're looking at losses on the road to Oklahoma, who before Mateer got injured was probably the best team in the SEC. And, whether it's a home loss to Ohio State or a road loss to USC or something like that, they're in position to have a resume of 10-2 with 2, good losses. So, like, there's 6 teams in my mind that have like a path to 10-2. Mm-hmm. And I think the Big 12 is going to beat itself up. I think the SEC is going to beat itself up, and no one cares about the ACC. Like, it just, like, Miami's good. I think Miami's good. Is Georgia Tech good? Boy, were they lucky to beat Wake Forest on Saturday. What is Florida State at this point? If Florida State can lose to Virginia, they can lose to anybody on their schedule. If Georgia Tech has to pull that out like that against Wake Forest, they can lose to anybody on their schedule. Like, I don't see the ACC getting 3 teams in or something like that. I mean, I think the ACC is going to get capped around 2. And I could see the Big 12 being a 1-bid league, especially if things go a certain way, like especially if like Texas Tech or something like that like rolls through it, because Arizona State brings in that Mississippi State loss from non-league. They squirm by like that's just a bunch of like the Big 12's got a bunch of like 8-win caliber teams in my mind. Now I think Utah could maybe bounce back. We'll see. Like BYU's still undefeated, but they really haven't had a tough challenge yet. I don't know. I mean, it's more fun to talk about this probably in like 2 or 3 weeks. I know it's like early to talk about this, but I'm looking at this and I'm like, do I think the Big Ten has 5 of the 12 best teams in college football? Yeah, I do. I think the Big Ten has 3 of the 5 best teams in college football right now, and maybe 4 of the best 6 or 7.
I would agree with that. And if anything, that
like how are there 8 teams out there better than Indiana? I don't know about that.
No, there aren't. If anything,
Indiana's probably the 4th best team in the conference.
Yeah. If anything, what you said, like now it's given me motivation to be flipping back and forth on Saturday night, to see how, because Miami is on the road at Florida State. And I know it's not, I mean, again, showing my age, that used to be the game, in terms of like a national importance, and it's lost its luster, but I think the stakes are very high, especially for Florida State, considering the way that they lost to Virginia. And Miami is kind of now they're expected to be the standard bearer for the whole conference. They're expected to be
number 3 now.
Yeah,
I mean, pressure's on them now, but so we'll see. But like other conferences aren't really holding up right now. Like they're seeing some kind of nasty upset. We're seeing nasty upsets in these other leagues every week, like bad losses. I mean, that Virginia loss is bad.
Yes,
that's going to hurt them at the end. Now they'll have that Bama win, and maybe Bama's the best team in the SEC now. I don't know. Maybe it's Texas. Maybe it's I don't know. But I thought Oklahoma was trending in that direction before the Mateer injury. I just think Oklahoma's defense is. I think they have the best defensive line in college football. Their defensive line is unbelievable. But now without Mateer, it's like, do they lose like 3 games down the stretch? I mean, they've got a bunch of good teams they got to play. So it's going to be interesting to see. I just think the SEC, they probably give the SEC 4 no matter what, but it's just like, I think they're going to beat each other up. I think we're already starting to see it. And I don't think anyone has a whole lot of respect for the Big 12 this year. So I don't know. And then there's like, who's the group of 5 team? I mean, you're going to have one of those, but
maybe Memphis
or South Florida, probably, but you're not going to have like a second team like it's going to have like a real strong case. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But any parting thoughts?
No, I'm glad that you I think you've raised some interesting points about with the Big Ten. It certainly is going to make it even more interesting to watch because, with the games, the conference games, I realized, for example, like USC is, they're going to be going to Notre Dame and like, for example, Northwestern is hosting UL Monroe. And, so the non-conference portion, the in-conference games are going to kind of be front and center, and how it all shakes out. It's going to be interesting to see week after week.
I'm glad you mentioned Notre Dame because that's one team. If you're the Big Ten and you're trying to get that 5th team, you want Notre Dame out of there. And quite frankly, I think you want Notre Dame out of there anyway because I think their offense is incredibly legit. And I think their defense has some issues. I don't know if they've got fixed against Arkansas. I watched a lot of that game. I'm still not sure they're fixed as much as Arkansas's like quit on their coach. But Notre Dame is not a team that you want to see squeeze in there at the end and have to host them as the 5 or 6 seed. If you're the 5 or 6 seed, you got to host Notre Dame in the first round on like a 10-game winning streak. That is not what you want to see. So you want to see. I'll tell you what can help the Big Ten get 5 is USC beating Notre Dame.
You got it.
That would go a long way right there. But yeah, if Notre Dame isn't taking a spot this year as an independent, that would go a long way again toward like the Big Ten or even the SEC, maybe hopefully trying to get a 5th team for their league. So we'll see. All right, we will be back here in a couple of days to preview the weekend and talk about the upcoming games. But definitely lived up to the billing this past Saturday. Hopefully we get some good ones this weekend. We'll see. The schedule's not quite as good on paper, but that weekends like that sometimes give us the best games. So we'll see what happens. But thanks everyone again for watching and listening, and we'll talk to you again here in a couple of days.